Hello, it's Mr. Drake, and this time of the year, I really miss being in class with my students. We're getting near the holidays. I have so many holiday books and things that I like to share in class, and now that we're not seeing each other in class, we're doing this virtually. I wanted to at least share some of these on video and post them with the school and post them on my YouTube channel so that folks can enjoy these wonderful books that we do in class together. And the first one I'm going to do today is called The Polar Express. It's a book by Chris Van Allsburg, who not only wrote the story but does the wonderful pictures. He's an award-winning illustrator, and I think you're really going to enjoy these pictures. And when I read this story to my students in school, I always ask them if they're excited about the holiday, and of course everybody is excited about Christmas coming, but then I ask them, well, are you excited about Santa Claus coming? And they look at each other. They're second, third graders. They don't really want to talk about Santa Claus or the magic of Christmas. And I asked them before the book, raise your hand if you believe in Santa Claus. And not a whole lot of hands get raised. So I wonder, as I talk to you about those of you out there, would you raise your hand if I asked you if you believed in Santa Claus? Okay, well, I want to read this story to you about the magic of Christmas, and at the end of the book, I'm going to ask you the same question. So let's get into the story now. And it's got such good illustrations. I'm going to zoom up close and just try to pan along with as I turn the pages. I'm going to just try to pan along with the pages so that we can see them up close and move it a little bit with us. So it's called The Polar Express. All right, here we go. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend of mine had told me I'd never hear. The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not the ringing of bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing and steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window, and I saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then he looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand, and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols. We ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northwards. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through dark, cold forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the white wilderness. We climbed mountains that seemed as high as the sky. It seemed as if we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned to hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing over a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "there is the North Pole." The North Pole, it was a huge city standing alone on the top of the world, filled with factories of where every Christmas toy was made. At first we saw no elves. "They are gathering in the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." Wow. "Look," shouted the children. "The elves!" Outside, we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. But when the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped, and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through the crowd at the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing that I'd ever heard. Across the circles, the elves moved apart, and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us, and pointing to me, said, "Let's have this fella here." He jumped into his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee. And he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew I could have any gift I could imagine. But the thing I wanted most was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told the elf to cut a bell from the reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood, holding it high above him, and called out, "The first gift of Christmas." A clock struck midnight. The elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me, and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip. The team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us, then disappeared into the dark, cold, polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell, and I reached in my pocket. But the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. It broke my heart to lose that bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Merry Christmas!" he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father. "It's broken." when I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as the years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I have grown old, the bell still rings for me, as it does for all who truly believe. And that's the Polar Express. So as I finish this book with my students, and as I finished it with you, I reach in my pocket because I have the bell. I have that bell from Santa's sleigh. And I shake it to see if you can hear it, to see if you really do believe. So here we go. So if you can hear the sound, there must be some of that Christmas magic left with you. I hope you enjoyed the Polar Express.